Good evening, I'm Kevin Owen. You're watching RT International. It's very good to have your company. So many developments over Syria today. Syria has agreed to Russia's proposal that it puts its chemical weapons stockpile under international control. US Secretary of State John Kerry initially suggested such a scheme earlier today as a way to avoid a military strike on Syria. But then, in an apparent U-turn, the US State Department issued a retraction saying it wasn't a genuine offer. RT's Sean Thomas reports.
It started off as a day of a meeting of the ministers, both from the Western side and with Russia and the Syrian foreign minister. In fact, they met earlier today. That is Walid al-Muallim and Sergei Lavrov. Coming out of that meeting, they both agreed that Syria would work with Russia to stop a strike from the West, and also Syria had agreed to come to the negotiating table with no conditions. That's big news. But the biggest news is that Syria has agreed to release their chemical weapons arsenal to the international community. Let's listen to what Walid al-Muallim had to say about that.
I have listened to the Russian foreign minister's statement, and I want to say that we welcome his initiative as our government cares about the lives of the Syrian people and our national security, and also because we trust the Russian government's judgment in its efforts to prevent US aggression against the Syrian people.
Now let's backtrack and see how we got to this exact point. It started off with John Kerry meeting with his counterpart in the UK, William Hague, in London. Out of that meeting, Kerry said that Syria, if they want to avoid an attack from the US, they could turn over their entire chemical weapons arsenal by the end of this week. Out of that, Sergei Lavrov then came out and said he welcomes this idea. He's willing to work with the United States and the Syrian government to make this idea a reality. Let's listen to what Sergei Lavrov's words were.
We saw that statement by John Kerry, who said there would be no strikes if Damascus hands over its chemical weapons arsenal to the international community. We don't know whether Syria would agree to it, but if that helps avoid a strike, then we're ready to negotiate with Damascus.
The State Department kind of issued a backtrack, if you will, stating that John Kerry's remarks were tongue-in-cheek. It was a rhetorical remark in response to the unbelievable idea that Bashar al-Assad would give up his chemical arsenal, an arsenal that he won't even admit to having. But after that retraction and after the idea came forward and after Sergei Lavrov said that he's willing to work with the US and with the Syrian government, lots of international support. In fact, UK's Prime Minister Cameron saying that it is a big step forward. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says he agrees with this concept, was considering a similar proposal from the UN as well, and then also urging Syria to join the chemical weapons ban.
Sean Thomas there. So Washington's sceptical, it seems, of the plan now put forward by Russia. State Department spokesperson Mary Harf played down the proposal in the last few hours, but opinion polls in the United States indicate that Americans are becoming increasingly reluctant to support any military action in Syria. New figures from the newspaper USA Today say that over 60% of those polled do not want their country to be involved in the Syrian conflict. Compare that then to a slightly older Reuters poll we've been showing you throughout the week, where 56% were against their strikes. You can see the change there. Let's get some reaction on the latest developments from our correspondent in New York now, Marina Portnaya's there. Hi, Marina. It's been a day of twists and turns, hasn't it? As I was saying earlier on, this proposal was put forward tentatively, and then there seemed to be this apparent U-turn from America.
That's right. I think many U.S. officials have been caught off guard by this proposal that would aim to solve the Syrian crisis without any type of military intervention. So far, it seems that U.S. officials are not so eager to explore or entertain the non-military solution on Syria that's been proposed by Russia. White House spokesperson Jay Carney says that the Obama administration will continue to try to get congressional authorization for a military strike on Syria despite the latest offer, this unexpected offer. Carney said that the White House feels that it must keep pressuring this, the Syrian government and threaten military strikes because he believes that it's due to the U.S. threats that caused the offer to be made today by Russia with Syria's support. U.S. officials, in the meantime, though, have gone so far as accusing Moscow, some U.S. officials, of using this proposal as a stalling tactic, of having the proposal be disingenuous. In the meantime, we also have heard from National Security Advisor Susan Rice, who believes that every time chemical weapons are used or moved around in Syria, it raises the likelihood that they will land in the hands of terrorists. Mrs. Rice said that that if left unchecked, she believes that the Syrian government and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad will use chemical weapons again. And she also said that the reason U.S. President Barack Obama has decided to pursue limited strikes, what they call limited strikes, U.S. officials, is that the United States and its allies have exhausted a host of other measures. So while this proposal has come out, this proposal for non-military intervention on Syria, a lot of U.S. officials seem to be standoffish. While they say that they will take a long, hard look at Russia's plan, they are still moving forward with President Obama's initial plan of launching military strikes. We should also mention that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton recently made some comments, and she said if the Syrian government immediately surrendered its chemical weapons to the international community, she believes that would be an important first step. She also said that that Russia's proposal should be used sincerely and not used as as an excuse for delay or obstruction of Washington's plans. But in the meantime of all these rejections, or somewhat rejections, of Russia's proposal, the Obama administration has not put forth their plan to avoid using the use of force against Syria. So far, we have not heard any alternatives from the White House, but U.S. President Barack Obama is filming 6 interviews throughout the day on Monday that are set to air. We expect that he might address Russia's proposal, and maybe at the end of the day, this military strike will delay, will stop. But all statements point to the fact that the Obama administration is continuing on the path that they've been cementing for the past few weeks, and that path is military strikes against Syria.
Marina Portnara, correspondent in New York, thanks for the update there. So, more of the chronology of the day. Russia initially taking what John Kerry said initially at face value, despite Washington then throughout the day trying to play down the idea of Syria handing over its chemical weapons. We asked Michael Maloof about this. He's a former senior security policy analyst at the U.S. Department of Defense, and he told us America's backpedaling provides an insight into what its real plans are, maybe.
Well, I think if the Syrian government comes around and says, yes, we're going to go ahead and do that, and Mr. Obama goes on TV Tuesday night and says he intends to still bomb, then I think that this clearly shows what this administration's goal was all along, and that was something beyond just chemical weapons, but to try to destabilize and replace the Syrian government. And of course, that's going to bring on all other kinds of ramifications, which are just going to be which is going to bring total instability to the Middle East. So the trade-off is dramatic, and I think that if Mr. Obama does not go along with this, then I think that we will seriously have serious problems. But on the other hand, this could be another way for the Obama administration to back its way out of the corner that it boxed itself into.
And that side of the story aside, in another potentially serious development today, anonymous sources close to the Syrian conflict told us at RT that rebel forces are planning to launch a, quote, provocation attack using chemical weapons against Israel. RT's Paula Slee has got more on that from Tel Aviv.
Nothing as of yet in the Israeli press or any kind of official comments. What we know is that RT sources are telling us that they have information that in the nearest future there will be an attack originating in the areas of Syria where the rebels are present, using certain unknown chemical weapons against the territory of Israel. Now, there are 2 important points I want to make. The first is that we are being told that these attacks will originate in territory that is being controlled by the Assad government. So what this clearly means is that the blame will go towards the Syrian regime. But on the other hand, it will be attacks that will be carried out by the Syrian rebels. As I say, no reaction as of yet here in Israel, but in the last 24 hours, there have been a number of emergency drills, particularly in the north of the country, in Israel's Golan Heights. We also are hearing now from the Israeli Institute for Policy Against Terrorism. On Monday, they released a report in which they say that they have information that there are chemical chemical weapons in Syria being housed in some 50 cities. 5 of those are cities with big factories. Now, the report is saying that the situation in these cities is constantly changing. So what this means is that sometimes the rebels are in charge, sometimes Assad's forces, and the conclusion is that there is the possibility that the rebel fighters will be in control of these weapons if and when these cities fall to their hands. The report also outlines concerns that Hezbollah or Palestinian organizations or al-Qaeda-linked organizations will get their hands on these chemical weapons. Israel, of course, is very, very concerned about any kind of attacks on Israeli territory that will emanate from Syria. In the past, it has struck Syria, at the time it said, to prevent weapon delivery to Hezbollah. Of course, it's common knowledge in Israel and elsewhere that this country benefits from Assad being in power. Otherwise, Israel would have to face a whole host of characters who ultimately are going to be worse than Assad himself. Although officially the Israeli point of view is that it is not involved inside Syria. But speaking to people here inside Israel, the Israeli point of view by and large is that the lesser evil is for Israel to coexist with the Assad regime. And of course, this is something that Israel has been doing for a few years. The alleged use of chemical weapons by the rebels is not something new. We've seen these allegations coming forward in the past. Of course, this is a conflict that has been laden with all kinds of provocations at all levels. We've seen horrifying pictures of dead children that were used by the Obama administration to justify a possible attack on Syria. And later it turned out that those children had in fact been kidnapped and slaughtered by the rebels with chemical weapons. Israel, of course, will take very seriously these latest claims that rebels are planning a major provocation to strike Israel from the territory currently being controlled by the Syrian government.
That's the picture then from Tel Aviv. Now, earlier, defense consultant Moin Rauf told me that the reports of Israel being targeted by Syrian rebels are not surprising as far as he's concerned.
Well, remember, the rebels have stated previously from the beginning of this year that they're going to attack Israel. This had been a stated goal from the beginning anyway. Once they had achieved their objectives in Syria, they would have gone on to Israel anyway. They kidnapped some UN observers in the Golan Heights earlier this year.
Had Israel underestimated the threat, do you think, so far?
Oh yeah, because Israel thought that once Assad leaves, there's going to be peace in the region. They had underestimated the rebels' goal, which was to start with Syria and then go on to Israel and other countries in the region.
Well, despite all the controversy and the uncertainty over Syria, nonetheless, President Obama still appears then to be sharpening his case for a military intervention ahead of that crucial Congress vote. He'll be making a string of media appearances later today before meeting Democrat lawmakers and addressing the nation Tuesday. The Senate could vote as early as Wednesday, and the House of Representatives may take another week then to make a decision. This is how it looks. Many in Congress aren't convinced by Obama's pitch right now. They want to see more evidence of Assad's involvement in last month's alleged chemical attack. According to a Washington Post estimate, a majority in both chambers of Congress are undecided. And here's how the Senate, we think, would play out if that vote took place right now. The House of Representatives could prove to be Obama's biggest challenge. It's dominated by Republicans who are overwhelmingly ahead of against the military plan. So plenty of resistance on Capitol Hill. With that side of it, Gani Chichikanda has been gauging the mood there. A report does contain some images which you might find upsetting.
The upcoming vote in Congress might not be as slam dunk as many thought it would be, considering the support for military action in Syria that congressional leaders have previously expressed. Members of Congress admit that they're being bombarded by calls from their constituents, 99% of whom demand that they vote no to the administration's plan to bomb Syria.
This administration has failed to show me the direct threat to the United States of America.
We have absolutely no guarantee it won't expand, no guarantee of peace in the region.
The CIA has prepared a video presentation that shows the aftermath of the horrendous attacks in Syria. It's a collection of gruesome videos that were previously posted on YouTube. It's designed to sway members of Congress to vote yes on bombing Syria. But the videos, as gruesome as they are, do not offer proof that the Assad government has carried out the attacks, nor does the 4-page unclassified report released by the administration earlier. Members of Congress are supposed to get the proof in classified hearings, but as Congressman Alan Grayson said, they're being given intelligence briefings without any hard evidence to support administration's claims that the Syrian leader has ordered the use of chemical weapons. Here's another caveat. Members of Congress are not allowed to discuss the classified hearings, so we have no way of knowing what the administration has actually provided as evidence. Lawmakers are unable to discuss the evidence, the classified evidence, even among themselves, unless they are inside an approved reading room. And as Congressman Grayson says, questioning the official account of events is, quote, actively discouraged.
Is that the Obama administration is doing what it calls flooding the field. In other words, trying to monopolize the conversation, dominate the discourse, and provide only information in favor of an attack to members of Congress and to the public. I think that's unfortunate. There's always two sides to the story. When you talk about war and peace, the public and Congress definitely deserve to hear about both sides.
The president's aides are saying that he will listen to Congress. The president himself is hinting that he might not listen to Congress, which of course begs the question, why this charade in Congress then?
Diana Chichikan. From the international political wrangling to the war raging in Syria itself, one ancient Christian village in the mountainous north of Damascus has been stormed by al-Qaeda-linked rebels. We've been covering this situation over the past few days, as you'll know if you've been watching us. Government troops did at one point manage to force them out, but then the rebels have now managed to return and turn that tide, and they're back in control of the village. RT's Maria Fanoshina witnessed all this. Here's the latest in her series of reports.
We saw what Maalula looks like right now, and this is a very sad picture. What used to be a picturesque village surrounded by mountains in the central part of Syria, where you feel like time has almost stopped, where people praying in numerous churches all across the village in Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ, in Greek, in Arabic, and in French. What also is home to dozens of mosques. This now looks like battlefield. I want you now to take a look at what we saw there.
The Syrian army is saying that there are militants in Maalula village right now, and they are in Safir Hotel. This is the mountaintop hotel, which was taken by the rebels, the armed rebels, on their first day, and they are firing even now from that strategic position.
Well, as I said, the militants, first of all, exploded the car at the checkpoint to enter the village, and after that they took the mountaintop Safir Hotel, and they are firing from this position, and this is the highest point in the village. And also there are militants behind the mountains that are surrounding Maalula, so their positions are very strong and are very good, and no one can say for sure now for how long it will last. Maalula is a very symbolic place. It reflects how the entire Syrian society used to be a very secular society and a very tolerant society. And right now we can see that this society is shaken, and this is exactly what is happening with the entire Syrian community. So it is a very symbolic attack. And recently we saw a video posted on YouTube where people who call themselves jihadists, mujahideen, who invaded Maalula, they are in Maalula on this video. They're saying that they came to Maalula to protect people from brutal regime of Bashar al-Assad. How cynic is this? We were in Maalula last year in spring, and I have to say that I haven't seen any place, even here in Syria, where life is so calm and is so peaceful.
Maria Fanoshina is, of course, one of the very few international correspondents reporting on the ground from Syria. You can follow her on Twitter for all the latest updates on what's happening there. She's also got pictures from Maalula, where she travelled with the Syrian army. You can see how that operation's been unfolding over the past few days and learn what makes that ancient landmark so unique.
To be in the know, follow us online.
Thanks for watching RT Tonight. We'll bring all the latest on the fallout from Moscow's mayoral election after the break.
agenda, U.S. President Barack Obama has ordered the Pentagon to double the attack force and expand the target list as part of his assumed assault on Syria. Irrespective of international opinion and polls at home, the U.S. on its own is poised to carry out forced regime change in Damascus. Well, at least that's the plan.